Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We will get started in just a few moments. We had around 70 people register for the webinar, so I'd like to wait until a few more people join before we start. Thanks for your patience. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I'd like to give it a couple of more minutes before we begin. We had many more people register than have joined the meeting just yet, so I'd like to give them a chance to join. Maybe just another 2 minutes and then we'll get started. Thanks for your patience. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we will go ahead and get started. Thank you all for taking the time today to learn about this grant opportunity. My name is Ginger Gossman, and I'm a Senior Director with Academic Affairs and Workforce Education at the Coordinating Board. And I'm joined today with my colleague, Doug Brock, who will be helping me with the webinar. He'll be monitoring the chat for your questions. Please use the chat liberally for your questions. It will help us save them for posterity so we can answer them if we're not able to get to all of them today. But also, once I begin sharing my screen for my brief PowerPoint presentation, I won't be able to see the chat. So we'll be very appreciative of Doug's help. So again, use the chat for your questions, please. I have muted everyone upon entry, so if you need to ask a question later, you'll need to unmute yourself. My wonderful boss, Ray Martinez, our deputy commissioner, was called into another obligation during the same time, so he's not able to join, but I will do my best to channel him for you this morning. This grant opportunity is a unique one for the coordinating board, and we're very excited to be offering it to you. Thank you for your interest. Really appreciate that, and all of your staff time and talent on this. This is part of a larger work-based learning grant program. We had a webinar earlier today on a separate program focused on internships. This webinar is focused solely on the apprenticeship piece of that program. These are gear funds, federal funds. So we are making sure that everything we provide through this webinar, everything we're doing through the RFA is following federal guidelines and making sure we're aligned with federal guidelines. So just wanted to say that these funds are part of a much larger pot of money that we've received from Governor Abbott to the coordinating board so that we could disperse funds through grant opportunities. This cycle of funding expires on September 30, 2022. And so you'll notice a very tight timeline for this program. And that is because we must expend these funds by September 30, 2022. We have received notification that additional funds will come to us from the governor, additional gear funds. So we may see more opportunities like this, or perhaps this program again. So keep your eyes open for future opportunities. With that, Doug, is there anything I should add before I get started?
I have to unmute myself first. So, just thank you all for participating, and we look forward to getting your wonderful applications and hearing all the great stuff that's going on out there in the field.
Terrific. Thank you, Doug. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Again, I do have a brief PowerPoint presentation to orient you on this grant opportunity. As I mentioned, myself and Doug are here to walk you through this program. Again, unfortunately, my wonderful boss had a conflict this morning, so he wasn't able to join us. But I know he is also extremely appreciative of your staff time and talent. And again, this webinar is focused solely on the apprenticeships opportunity as part of this work-based learning grant. So we have a packed agenda for this today, but really the long list you see here is basically delineating the slides that I will be sharing with you today. So we'll dig into the purpose, the goal, and the focus of the program, the awards per institution, the criteria we're expecting from your projects, allowable expenses, the timeline of activities related to this grant opportunity, the selection criteria, the evaluation rubric, the application outline, and then of course, hopefully we'll have a lot of time for questions and answers. So let's get started. As I mentioned, this grant opportunity is funded through GEAR, the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. And the purpose of the apprenticeship program is to address the widening gaps in workforce and learning opportunities that occurred during COVID. We all saw during the pandemic pretty significant shifts in the labor market and trickled down to higher ed as well. So we're really trying to provide support to you to help you address some of those widening gaps that happened in the last 24 months, 20 months. Again, this grant opportunity is designed to strengthen the education and workforce pipeline. We really want to help students find that path towards success. And in the grander scheme of things, this can help and will help the state's economic recovery from the pandemic. The pot of money that the pot of GEAR money that this comes from was $94.6 million, and we have $1 million dedicated to this apprenticeship grant opportunity. So the purpose again is to really strengthen that connection between you as educators and your industry partners. We know as 2 years institutions, you already have very strong relationships. So hopefully this will be just one more way for you to strengthen those connections. This grant is limited to spring and summer 2022, and it is to support or expand apprenticeship training programs. The focus, there's a number of ways in which you can propose activities for this grant: training costs, assisting with student financial aid for apprentices. Really, registered apprenticeship programs are a priority of the program. You can also use this grant for pre-apprenticeship programs, and also trying to encourage participation from non-traditional students and employers. And that definition of non-traditional is outlined in the RFA. And you can also use these funds for faculty development. So public 2-year institutions are eligible for this grant opportunity. We are asking that you submit one proposal per institution. So we are aware you have many apprenticeship opportunities or existing apprenticeship programs on your campuses, across your campuses, and that they reside in different training, academic or training programs. So we are asking you to consolidate your effort into one single application. And highly encourage you, if you have a career services office, or you have career services professionals that work with you in your apprenticeship programs, that you engage them in this, in your application process. The maximum award per institution is $165,000. And again, the grant period ends on September 30, 2022. And what that means is that the money has to be spent by September 30, 2022. More to come on that. So these are the project criteria, which are very closely aligned, absolutely aligned with your allowable expenses. So you can support training costs. You can support apprentices with demonstrated financial need. You can expand your registered apprenticeship programs. You can also develop registered apprenticeship programs, and you'll see that when we get to allowable expenses as well. You can develop pre-apprenticeship programs. You can engage in efforts to encourage the participation from those non-traditional audiences that I just mentioned, and again, for faculty development. The items you see highlighted here can be shown preference in your grant application if these activities are related to high demand registered apprenticeship programs. So when we say high demand in the RFA, we do suggest that you include data to demonstrate that the registered apprenticeship program is high demand. I think many of you are familiar with labor market data available to you, such as Burning Glass or MZ, but we also created a tool with Brookings last year, and I will drop that link in the chat after I conclude my presentation. So we have a tool that you could use as well. But again, these activities can be considered priority if they are related to a high demand registered apprenticeship program. So these are the allowable uses, and this list will look very familiar to you since we've just gone over the last few slides. So I won't delineate each allowable use, as it is very much a repeat, although I did also add here that you can develop registered apprenticeship programs. That is an allowable use. And I will defer for a moment to my colleague Doug to address the prohibited costs.
Thanks, Ginger. So in compliance with the GEAR funds and uniform grant guidance, this RFA will specifically not allow the use of the grant funds for travel expenses, marketing, communications, unless that pertains directly to the grant program as included in your budget. Technology is not used for instructional support. And then in addition to that, while not necessarily prohibited, in terms of capital improvements, purchase of real property, renting of property, I highly encourage you to speak with your legal counsel or grant experts at your institution, as any funds that are used for that purpose could be subject to, ownership by the federal government, as these are federal grant funds. And so really the idea is here to use them within the allowable uses here and not for any capital improvements or, purchase of any property or construction. And if there are any specific, if you have any specific questions you're going through your application, what's allowable and what's not allowable, you also can reach out through our inquiry email address is provided in the RFA.
Thank you, Doug. And just again, we're trying very hard to make sure that the documentation we're providing in this PowerPoint, which will be available on our program website after the webinar is over today. This prohibited cost is really just cut and pasted from the RFA. So this is exactly the correct language. Now, as we get into the timeline of activities in the next few slides, as you know, this is a very quick turnaround. This is a short clip because we have to spend the money by September 30. So we're really suggesting that you avoid procurement processes because they may eat up a lot of time from your goals and activities. And again, this is informed directly from the RFA, but also the budget is aligned exactly with our budget request form. So this is that timeline of activities. Thank you for all of your time today and your interest. The last day for inquiries is the 25th. So very soon, in the next 5 days. The application deadline is in a week and a half. It is Monday, January 31st. And we hope to repay your courtesy of a very quick turnaround by having our review process be quick as well. High quality review, but also quick. And we hope to announce these awards on February 15th. So I'd like to review the core, well, all of the application, the application selection criteria, and the first few slides are dedicated to the core selection criteria. So the first thing we're asking for in the application is a description of your current processes for executing apprenticeships across your campus. Could explain to us how they are managed, how they're structured and supported, and if you would please also include data on students from the last academic year. For example, how many students participated in apprenticeships, what were the range of wages. Any data that you can compile would be really helpful for us to understand, because this is really, we're really looking to see what existing processes you have on your campus. We'll also be asking for a description of your project in the application. We want to make sure it fits the overall design, which you see explained in the RFA. Also, please, in this section, let us know if you're focused on any of the grant priorities. And of course, the grant priority here is the support, expansion, or development of high demand registered apprenticeship programs. In this section, please also include a clear connection to your employer partners. We know you're working with employer partners because you have your existing apprenticeship programs. So however you can do that for us would be really helpful for just additional insight into your existing programs. So a list of industry partners, if you would like to include letters of support, that would also be helpful. But really, we just want to know who are the top employers you're working with across your campus and different academic or technical areas. So in the application, we're also looking for a description of your project goals and activities. Please make sure that they are very clear to someone who may not know anything about your apprenticeship programs, and also that they connect back to the purpose and fit with the RFA. And additionally, we would like a a description of you as an institution. And this will, in this description, you can show your commitment and interest in, or commitment to this RFA grant opportunity. And here, so earlier we talked about a list of current employer partners. In this description of applicant, we're also interested in knowing what employer partners will be part of this, might be part of this grant opportunity. So earlier, just who are you working with writ large, but in this particular section, who might actually be participating in terms of employers in this grant opportunity. And those are the core selection criteria. Again, this is very much aligned with all of the documentation we have posted. If you look on the program website, there are applications, instructions, the budget form and instructions, and the RFA, and everything we're talking about here are aligned with all of those documents. Also in the application, we're definitely going to need a project timeline. We would like to see how your timeline aligns with your semester structure. That semester structure does not have to be a traditional semester, but that will be helpful for us to see, mostly to bolster our confidence that you can expend the funds within the semesters we identified, spring and summer 2022. And again, in your proposed budget, we really want to see a demonstration that you're maximizing your dollars relative to the allowable expenses and activities that you proposed. So these are our selection criteria, or our scoring rubric, if you will. So I have tried to demonstrate for you in the application what section of the application is related to which element in the application, so you can see how it's being scored. Hopefully this will be helpful to you, and because we as the reviewers will be using this to score the applications. So what goes in your application? When you go to the program website, you'll see a form that is the application, and that form includes numbers 1 through 5. And the application instructions includes instructions for number 1 here through 5. There's also a separate budget request form and instructions that you'll need to complete. Number 7, you'll need to refer to the RFA for those federal certifications. So if you go to appendices F as in Frank, G as in Ginger, and H as in hello, those are the federal certifications that we will also need for you to include in your applications. So with that, we will move on to questions. And as Doug mentioned, if we do not get to your question here, feel free to email before the inquiry deadline of January 25th. I will stop sharing and we will begin addressing your questions.
Thanks, Ginger. So we have, once again, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. We will move through them as time allows, and we have plenty of time. So we have a couple questions regarding who is eligible under this grant, and it is limited to Texas public 2-year institutions only, not private institutions, not nonprofit institutions. You know, that definition is found under the eligible entity criteria in the RFA, as well as in the Texas Education Code and Texas Administrative Code. But it is limited to the public 2-year institutions. The slight, well, and actually to add to that a little bit, do remember, as Ginger pointed out, that there is encouragement within the RFA for partnerships. So while the eligible entity must be the 2-year, if you have partnerships or want to work on partnerships, those are allowable under the RFA. The slide deck and presentation will be available after this presentation, so you can go back and reference it if needed. I have a question, there's a couple on regarding use of grant funds. So the first one, well, grant funds, can you use grant funds to offset wages, reimbursement, stipends, etc.? No, that is not allowable under the RFA. And additionally, for for pretty much all federal funds, you have to supplement, not supplant funding. So offsetting is a supplanting of availability of other funds. These funds can only be used to supplement existing or creating new programs. It can't be used to like, well, we'll take money that was allocated to this, put it somewhere else, and we'll use these federal funds for that. That's prohibited.
And this might be an opportunity, Doug, just to explain to anyone who might have attended our 9 a.m. webinar. If you did, thank you for coming to both. This RFA for apprenticeships is pretty different from the RFA for internships. So
yes.
Just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah.
They are pretty different. If you plan to apply for both, cheers, that would be wonderful. But please pay close attention to the language because they are not the same.
Yeah.
I had a quick follow-up question on that, Doug.
Sure.
So will this pay for offset for employer wages, to offset the cost of wages for employers?
No, not under the apprenticeship grant program. Now, if you're applying for the internships, I don't want to get into the internship one, but if you have an internship program that can be used for wages that turn an unpaid internship to a paid internship. But under the apprenticeship, for apprenticeship programs, no, it cannot be used for wages or stipends or anything of that sort.
I see. Okay. What about wages offset by other grant initiatives, such as through Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, or if we have IRAP or SRE sponsors who are on the eligible training provider list, will they be eligible for wages to be reimbursed through this program, or no, would still be supplanting?
That would be supplanting, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
May we include student costs of books, materials, supplies, and supportive services for supportive training costs? Yeah, those would all be in support of training costs. Those would be allowable. The only one, gas allowances would fall under travel. That wouldn't be allowed. What projects would work if you don't already have existing apprenticeships at your school? So under this RFA, it does require the institution to have an existing apprenticeship program in some form or fashion. Doesn't mean your department has to have it, but somewhere at your institution, there has to be an existing apprenticeship program to be eligible. And then if you do, you can use this grant to expand the scope of your apprenticeship opportunities or develop new ones, but you have to at least have a starting place to be eligible for this grant. There's several reasons for that, but one of them is honestly to do with the limited time that these funds must be used within. And that is, that's not our requirement, that's the federal requirement in regard to these specific gear funds. So they have to be expended by September 30th, 2022. And this is awesome. There's a comment in here, not a question, about already looking for partnerships. That's great. Encouraged partnerships. Can a college support registered apprenticeships at other organizations through this funding to help them expand? So I guess that would depend. I mean, you need to have registered apprenticeship programs at your institution. And if you're using that as an opportunity to expand your existing apprenticeship programs at your institution, that's a possibility for a partnership. Next question, we have a RA, I'm assuming that's registered apprenticeship, that we are trying to develop that is a very new high demand area for our local community. So much of the data available in database does not reflect the high demand. We have several companies moving into the area or expanding in the next 2 years. Can letters from industry partners be used to help establish high demand? Yes. Yeah. That is great data, great information, and yes, you should include that. Can funds be used to support students in the form of a stipend, scholarship, upon completion of the apprenticeship internships. No, but it does allow for, based on financial need, to provide financial aid directly to students in the apprenticeship program. Now that's capped at $2,500 per student. And the criteria for that is clearly laid out in the RFA. The financial need is broadly determined. A lot of it's left up to the institution to show a demonstrated financial need. So in that case, yeah, like you can provide financial aid support of up to $2,500 for a student in the apprenticeship program. If we have a pre-apprenticeship program, will that make us eligible? I'm not clear on what a pre-apprenticeship program is. Ginger, do you have any insight on that?
So a pre-apprenticeship program, are strategies in place to help someone enter an apprenticeship program, is my understanding.
Okay.
We will have to confer to respond to this question, because we want demonstrated systems in place to execute an apprenticeship program. That's why we're asking for evidence of at least one existing apprenticeship program. And so I will confer with colleagues, and when we post these questions and responses online, we will address that. Thank you for the question.
So this is we have a couple there's actually just one question left. It's very specific. Let me see if I can turn it into something we can work with. We are funded by TIA and partner with community colleges and other daycare. So if you have an existing apprenticeship program, that would be eligible. But once again, the entity who is eligible has to be a public 2-year institution. These grant funds you're not eligible to apply if you are a private institution, a nonprofit institution. It has to be the public 2-year institution that must apply. And those are a public 2-year institution is this is a little bit confusing because in the education code, it's referred to as a junior college. We don't really use that terminology anymore. Those are all referred to, as y'all are very well aware, as community colleges. But if you go to the education code and to the administrative code, it's going to be referred to as a junior college. So a public, meaning that they get funding directly from the legislature through the coordinating board to you. And then that also includes, so junior colleges, public 2-year technical and state colleges. That excludes a 4-year college, and it must be considered a public institution. And those are all the questions we have. Oh, got one more. Okay. Appreciate that clarification on the pre-apprenticeship program. So as of now, based on how the RFA is drafted, it does require there to be an existing apprenticeship program. If all you have at your institution is a pre-apprenticeship program, as of now, you would not be eligible because it's not a true apprenticeship program. As Ginger stated, she's going to check in with her colleagues. If there is a change to that eligibility criteria, that will be announced through an amendment to the RFA. But as of now, there has to be some kind of existing apprenticeship program at your institution. Ginger, do you want to let them know how do you know if you have a registered apprenticeship program?
Sure. So just for a clarification, to be eligible, you need to have at least one standing apprenticeship program. To be eligible, that standing apprenticeship program does not necessarily have to be registered. In the grant program itself, the priority projects will be those that seek to support, expand, or develop registered apprenticeship programs. Your program to be registered has to go through a process. To be registered apprenticeship program means you're federally registered, and we can find more information to more thoroughly identify how that process happens. But your department and your faculty will know if it's in a registered apprenticeship program, because there is a process involved.
And my apologies. Yeah, my apologies for using acronyms. So there was a question on about partnerships, and they were allowed under and nobody understood the acronym. So it's RFA, which is request for applications. A request for application is what is used for a grant announcement. So if there is a grant availability through the coordinating board and really any state agency, it will be announced as an RFA, which means that there is an opportunity for grant funding from a state agency. That is very much different than an RFO, which is a request for offer. And that is a request for someone to provide goods or services to a state agency. So in this case, we're not asking you to provide the coordinating board with any goods or services. What we're trying to do is provide funding directly to the institution to help build up, expand, grow the apprenticeship programs available at your institution. All we ask in return is that you provide us periodic reports on all the great things you're doing and how you're using that funding and how you're growing the apprenticeship programs. That's what we ask in return. So is it allowable to do an apprentice with another state agency? I mean, yeah, definitely.
Yes, especially if the agency is the Texas Workforce Commission.
Yeah.
They're the experts. We love it.
And we have worked with Texas Workforce Commission quite closely on this grant opportunity. So they're very much aware. So if the institution has been serving apprentices with various employers but not actually have an existing registered, yes, you are not, to be eligible, you don't have to have a registered apprenticeship program. Now, that means eligible. Remember, these are limited grant funds. So if we get, and this is just an example, we have an allocated amount of funding that we can use for this grant program. If we get 60 applications and 58 of them are registered apprenticeship programs, and those are given priority. So if the funding runs out for those 58, if you don't have a registered, that means that you won't get those priority points, which will affect your evaluation score. But it doesn't mean you're not eligible. Because it could be we get, and these are all example numbers. Like I haven't run the math on any of these, but let's say we get 20 applications and, only 5 of them are registered and the other ones are not registered. Then there's a greater probability that you're going to get funded under this RFA. Can this grant be used in combination with other grants received from other sources? Of course. This grant does not require any matching requirements or in-kind contributions. So we're not asking in this for you to provide, we'll fund 50% of your program. You have to provide support. You're going to fund the other percent. That's not required. So yeah, like you can use this in combination with other grants to help expand. Like this is not meant to just limit you to, you can only use these fundings and that's it. Like if you have matching availability, if you have in-kind contributions, if you have other grant sources, use it in combination to help grow it. All really good questions. And I do really like, just as irrelevant, but I do really like that there's someone else on this webinar that has almost the same exact name as me, just one extra letter. Well, if there are no further questions, I think we're ready to close this out and give you all back some time. Really, really appreciate your time and attention and the questions during this. Really look forward to seeing your applications and the great ideas you have going, and get to brainstorming, come up with some great programs, and we look forward to be able to fund them. I'll hand it off to Ginger.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending. Really appreciate your time, and we fully recognize the amount of time and effort and talent that will go into your application preparation, and are so deeply appreciative. We will do our very best to turn these applications around and score them thoughtfully and authentically, to make sure that we announce the awards on time on February 15th, so that we can begin that contracting process and execute on funds as quickly as possible. So again, we have all your questions. Thank you for using the chat so we could save them and respond to them in writing, and we will post those on the program website as soon as we are able. We have all of your registration information, so we plan to use that to alert you when that information has been added, so you can use it for reference for your applications. I'm going to hang out here for a bit so that I can make sure I save everything that shows up in the chat. But again, thank you for your time and your interest and the time you're about to invest. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, colleagues. Sorry I wasn't able to join you earlier. We're so glad that you all joined us today, and I look forward to working with all of you as usual as your Assistant Commissioner of Workforce Education. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.